We tend to think of assassination attempts as these just chaotic, random moments in history. But what if there's actually a pattern to the political fallout? Today, we're going to dig into this really strange and powerful lesson from history. What happens when the bullet hits its mark? What happens when it just wounds? And what happens when it misses completely? The answers might surprise you.
The brain is missing. That is the official, chilling response the National Archives gives when you ask to examine President John F. Kennedy's brain. I mean, think about that. It perfectly captures the mystery and the deep sense of loss that surrounds a successful assassination. It's not just that a person is gone. It's like clarity and sometimes justice just vanishes with them. For so many, the story always starts here. Dallas. An open-top car, a waving president, and then those shots that echoed through history. JFK's assassination is, for better or worse, our ultimate reference point for this. It was a moment that didn't just end a life, it really felt like it shattered a whole generation's sense of optimism and threw the country onto a totally different path.
Right. So JFK's story is the one we all know. But here's where things get really, really interesting. It's the stories of survival that are truly fascinating. Because when you start looking at the attempts that failed, well, a very clear and kind of counterintuitive pattern starts to emerge. And it tells us a whole lot about politics, how we see our leaders, and power itself. But before we can get to the survivors, we really have to understand the stakes. 4 times in U.S. history, an assassin's bullet found its target. And each time, it slammed the book shut on a chapter of the nation's story. So let's just quickly look at who they were. So here's the key thing to see. It's the impact of each death. Lincoln's assassination just shattered any hope for a gentle, peaceful reconstruction after the Civil War. Garfield's was this slow, awful tragedy that was really a lesson in just how primitive medicine was back then. McKinley's murder by an anarchist brought in this whole new kind of political fear. And Kennedy's, well, as we said, it felt like the end of an era of hope. Okay, now here's where our story takes a really sharp turn. What happens when the president gets hit but doesn't die? Well, history shows a remarkably consistent outcome. A wounded survivor often becomes a kind of political legend, gaining a level of popularity they probably could have only dreamed of before the attack. Oh man, you gotta hear this story. Take Theodore Roosevelt in 1912. He's on his way to give a speech, and bang, he gets shot in the chest. But the bullet was slowed down by his glasses case and a super thick 50-page speech manuscript folded in his pocket. He kind of checks himself, realizes he's not coughing up blood, so he figures his lung is okay, and then he gets up and speaks for 90 minutes. With the bullet still lodged in his chest. And believe it or not, this pattern is not a one-off. Just look at the comparison. Roosevelt's whole bull moose moment basically cemented his tough guy image forever. Then, fast forward decades, and Ronald Reagan experiences almost the same thing. After he was shot, his popularity just surged. Surviving that bullet transformed him from just a politician into a hero in the eyes of a lot of Americans. And with Reagan, his response was just as important as his survival. As they're wheeling him into surgery, he famously jokes with the doctors. That kind of humor, that grace under pressure, was broadcast everywhere. And it wasn't just a short-term boost that helped him pass his economic plans. It had a really long-term impact. The Brady Bill, named for his press secretary who was paralyzed in that same attack, was passed years later, leading to tighter gun laws. Okay, so we've seen what happens when a president dies and when a president is wounded. But what about when the attacker just fails completely? The president walks away without a single scratch. This is where the pattern gets even sharper.
So this has to be one of the most bizarre episodes in all of presidential history. In just 17 days, 2 different women tried to assassinate President Gerald Ford. The first time, the gun just misfired. The second time, a bystander actually deflected the shot. And yet, despite surviving 2 attempts on his life, Ford got no popularity boost. None. He went on to lose the 1976 election.
And here's another incredible close call. President George W. Bush is giving a speech in Georgia, and a live grenade lands just 100 feet away from him. A live grenade. But the pin was jammed because it was wrapped in a handkerchief. Bush was so unaware of what happened that he just finished his speech. It was an incredibly dramatic event, but because he was totally unharmed, it barely made a blip politically. It was just forgotten.
Okay, so let's put all of this together. We've seen these different outcomes, from horrible tragedy to miraculous survival. So what's the underlying logic here? What's the political pattern that connects all of these events? Let's decode it.
This table really lays it all out pretty clearly. If an assassin succeeds, it's the end of an era. If the president is unharmed, the event is just forgotten. But if they are wounded and survived, they often get this massive surge in popularity. But, and this is important, notice the exception, George Wallace. The presidential candidate was paralyzed in a 1972 attempt, and while he got a lot of sympathy, it didn't translate into a political victory. So this shows it's a really powerful tendency, but not some unbreakable law of politics.
So why does any of this historical pattern matter today? Well, because very, very recently, we saw it play out again, almost exactly like the template would predict. This isn't just dusty old history. It is a living, breathing political force.
The scene, a political rally in Pennsylvania. 8 shots ring out. The target is former President Donald Trump. It's one of those moments that just instantly brings all of this history rushing right into the present day.
And the political aftermath was immediate and frankly dramatic. Right after the attempt, reports showed a huge surge in campaign donations and support. And then just 8 days later, his opponent, President Joe Biden, actually withdrew from the race. It fit that wounded survivor pattern perfectly. A politician's story, which seemed to be at one stage, was suddenly and violently restarted.
And this moment right here is what defined the whole narrative. Moments after being grazed by that bullet, Trump stood up, fist in the air, shouting to the crowd. That single image of a defiant, blood-streaked survivor became the defining visual of the event. It went all around the world and completely shaped how people saw what happened.
So that leaves us with this final question. History seems to suggest that a bullet that wounds but doesn't kill can give a leader this immense political power. It creates a story of strength, of destiny. As we watch events continue to unfold, the thing to remember is this pattern: a line of blood, a story of survival, and the unpredictable, yet strangely consistent, politics of the bullet.